Well, good evening and welcome to the Barry Beat Podcast, live, Main Street, Barre, Vermont, streaming from Fly in the Wall Production Studios. In the room with us tonight, we have Raylene and Mr. John Rodgers. He's running for Lieutenant Governor. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you, Michael?
I can't complain too much, just complaining all the time, but
Right.
no one
If
ever
you complain
listens.
too much, people will stop
I don't
listening
listen to
you.
him.
No, nobody listens to me. So, what are you doing here?
Well, somebody invited me along, and so I went out and waved to people and smiled all day from St. Albans all the way down through Chittenden County and ended up here in beautiful downtown Barre to chat with you folks. Wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, we're certainly glad to have you here. For folks that don't know, John Rodgers is running for Lieutenant Governor on the Republican ticket.
Mm-hmm.
He's running against Greg Thayer, and he wanted to come in and let Barre City know what he represents and how he's going to be able to represent you if he's selected. Well, I did a pitch for you.
You did. Is it my turn to talk?
It is your turn to
Absolutely.
talk.
Cool.
So why don't you tell us what your reasons and why you're running?
Yeah, so as many people know, I served in the House for 8 years. I served in the Senate for 8 years. I have been away for 4 years now. But seeing what happened after the last 2 years, myself and a couple of close friends put together a couple rallies at the State House this past spring. When I saw the bill that was trying to destroy the Fish and Wildlife Board, a board that has been functioning as well or better than any other board in the state for many years, doing a great job managing our fish and wildlife, get rated very highly by the people who participate in those sports, and the anti-hunters were trying to destroy that board. So that was one of the reasons that I really got going, because I feel like the current legislature is attacking rural Vermont and the rural Vermont culture. So that was the thing that really got me in the building. And then there were all the other swirling issues of driving the cost of living up. And so a couple of my friends are lobbyists and advocates and whatnot, folks I've worked with for years. And every time I'd go down to testify on a bill, they would say to me, John, we got to do something. There's all these things going wrong. So together with my friend James Ellers, who's politically quite a bit to the left of me, and my friend Mike Covey, who's quite a bit politically to the right of me, we said, let's do something. Let's get people in the State House that are dissatisfied. And I said, we're not going to all agree on everything,
Right.
but let's pull people together on these issues that we agree on. The attack on the rural culture and the cost of living. And we had everybody from one of my friends who says, I'm a socialist. She says, I don't mind paying high taxes if we get some services, but we're not even getting any services. All the way to the other, we had people very far right on the political spectrum, but they all agreed on those core issues. And we all worked together, and we put hundreds of people in the State House to protest, to try to give Governor Scott some support for his vetoes, which we know that didn't work very well. But we were able to get the Fish and Wildlife Bill hung up on the wall, and so that finished that one off. But while I was at those rallies, I had so many people asking me to please run for something again. At that point, I was kind of thinking I might run for the Senate seat, but I had gotten really comfortable with not being there because it takes a lot from my business, which is stonework and excavation. It's a lot of time away from my family. It's a big commitment, and it's a political service, and if you're really doing the job well, it's a lot of hard work. But finally, I decided, after talking with my wife, who wasn't real happy at first about me going back into politics, I told her, I said, if I don't run for something and try to correct what I see as Vermont going off the rails, I will be very mad at myself the day after the election. And so that's when I decided to run for Lieutenant Governor.
Nice.
I'm happy that you did.
Well, thank you.
I really am. I think that Well, one, just having a common sense Vermonter sitting in there, someone that has, you, like you said, you grew up on a dairy farm, you've worked a dairy farm, you own your own business, you know what it's like to pay all of these new taxes, and um, it's a strain on everyone no matter who you are, which is what you pretty much just said. It doesn't matter where you are politically, it's a strain for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And for some reason, I don't know what kind of lifestyle, what life experiences the majority of the legislature has lived to be making these decisions and who they're talking to, because I find it hard to believe any one of them can go out and talk with constituents and say, do you support your property taxes going up somewhere between 14 and 20%? Do you support your electric bills going up $100 million a year across the state? Do you support your heating oils going up billions of dollars over the next 10 years? I can't see that many people in the public saying, yes, that sounds great. But yet they're doing it because I think they're operating in a bubble. I think they've stopped listening to the public, and they talk to each other, and they talk to the well-paid lobbyists who do not represent average people. The lobbyists represent wealthy people and wealthy businesses who are profiting from this legislation.
One of the things that you mentioned is your extensive career as a politician for the state of Vermont, and I know. So I assume you were House first, and then you went to Senate.
Yes.
So you must have been in the House about the same time as Paul Poyer, correct?
I remember Paul, sure do.
Yeah. Paul Poyer, you remind me a lot of him because he's a very center kind of guy.
He was very independent.
He was very independent.
Yes.
And one of the things that he was very strong on and got a lot of love was from the gun lobby. So you had mentioned that you're concerned about the laws that are going into effect for guns. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your stance on gun control?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I grew up on a farm, and a gun was considered a tool. It's like a hammer, it's like a chainsaw. It's a tool that you use for what you need that tool for. We hunted with them, which put food on the table and was also a form of recreation for us. But also, when you live in a very sparsely populated area, if you call the police, it could be an hour or two before police get there. So you have to have the ability to protect yourself, or you're just vulnerable. And so firearms have been a part of our life, you know, for nearly the 200 years that my family has been there on the farm, and same all around rural Vermont. And the interesting thing is, when I was in high school, a lot of us farm boys, we brought our rifles to school, and we'd leave them in the car. We'd leave them in the gun rack in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And at lunchtime, I distinctly remember going out, and we're all showing each other what we hunt with. We're telling hunting stories and all. And nobody ever once thought of shooting another person. And so it's not the guns that are doing this damage, and taking guns away from law-abiding gun owners isn't going to help what is going on. We have some serious problems in society. And in Vermont, most of the shootings and most of the violence is driven by the drug problem. It's driven by the drug traffickers and the gangs and you know, the people who are breaking into homes to steal, to support their habit, and all this. So, you know, we really need to focus on what the issue is, and that's public safety. We need to give the police and the judiciary the tools they need to crack down on these guys that are bringing this poison into the state of Vermont. So, yeah, I've been a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment and Article 16, but I'm a strong supporter of the entire Constitution, and I don't believe that anybody should start picking it apart piece by piece. It is a unit, and the Second Amendment is just as important as the First Amendment, and it all holds itself together. So yeah, just always been very supportive of that.
So in connection to that, gun control, one of the things that was recently passed was some gun control on gun shows. Barre City, we have an annual gun show that is well attended. And unfortunately, I think it's this February was the last year that that'll probably be the way that it was, because there's now the 30 or 3-day
3-day waiting period.
Yeah. So that has a huge impact in Barre City.
And a lot of other areas that had gun shows.
Right.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, so that one really bothers me. So I was in the legislature when they passed the magazine ban, and I told them that was unconstitutional. I did my best to stave that off, but it passed anyway. The 72-hour waiting period has already been determined by the Supreme Court of the United States to be unconstitutional. So from my perspective, every single legislator who voted for that violated their oath of office and should be removed from office. If you violate your oath, you should not hold that office. They know it. And the supermajority has so much power now that they don't even care, that they're willing to violate their oath of office. They're willing to violate the Constitution. And now it's people like me and the other gun owners and sportsmen that are donating money to the fund to fight it in court, which I believe we will prevail. Even if we have to take it to the Supreme Court of the United States, we will prevail, because it's already been determined that both that 72-hour waiting period and the magazine ban are unconstitutional. And so what really bothers me is we're donating all this money to fight against an unconstitutional law, but we're also paying the taxes to fund the state lawyers who are fighting to keep it in place. And it's very unfortunate. And I think we're really in trouble when you have a legislature that is so emboldened that they start violating their own oath of office.
It's unfortunate with that kind of the political control of one party in the legislature.
For sure.
And for those that don't know what the magazine law is, it was passed a couple, 6-8 years ago, changing it so that only 10 rounds
for long
magazine.
Yeah, for a long gun, 10-round magazine is maximum, and for a handgun, it's a 15-round maximum, which means there are certain firearms now that you can't buy in the state of Vermont because they are manufactured with certain magazines in them.
Right. So you also mentioned drugs, and
That's where I was going.
I know that Raylene has probably got all sorts of questions she'd like to ask you. So go for it, Raylene.
I just, you mentioned criminals bringing the poison into the state of Vermont. And right now we know that laws are not very strict on dealers. And that's where the big problem is. We need to, in my mind, we need to get the addicts more help. We need to have more services.
Yeah.
And a mandatory long-term rehabilitation as far as I'm concerned, but we definitely also need to do something about people who continue to traffic drugs into the state of Vermont. And how do you feel about that? What are we going to do here?
Yeah, it really starts with the traffickers. They're the ones that are bringing it in, and will literally give the stuff away to try to get people hooked on it. It's very unfortunate. We obviously need more enforcement. We need to give them the tools they need, because in a lot of communities, they know where the houses are that the drug dealers and drug traffickers are operating out of. I mean, I'm no law enforcement specialist, so I know they have to do everything perfectly, or they get away with it. But we need to give them whatever tools they need to stop these traffickers.
And right now they don't have those tools.
And they don't even have the numbers. I mean, we were just over in Burlington, and Chief Murad put on a presentation for us, and the whole defund the police thing that I think I think the lieutenant governor actually supported, the current lieutenant governor actually supported the whole defund the police thing. So, but they went from like 105 police over there down into the 60s, and he's having trouble filling positions now. And Burlington has gone from one of the safest, cleanest cities you could find anywhere to a place that a lot of people won't bring their families anymore.
I don't dare go there.
Because there's people shooting up in the street, there's homeless people all over, there's shootings in the park, there's drug dealers all around, people's cars are getting broken into. And I feel so bad. I've got friends that have businesses in downtown Burlington, and there's a lot of really great businesses in downtown Burlington. And one of my friends said they're like 20% off on business. And he said all the people he talks with are like 20% off because people have stopped going down there because they no longer feel safe.
And I feel like it's that's everywhere. I feel like people believe that about here in Barre and in Montpelier, that they're tired of seeing it in every corner they look, because it really is that bad. And I'm the mom of an addict.
Yep.
Been fighting the fight with him for 15 years now, and it's always it's something that I'm very invested in, as far as getting the word out, I guess, and making sure that people understand what is actually happening here, because I don't think that people understand that it starts in Montpelier. The police only have the friends that you speak of that are on the drug task force. They can do a phenomenal job and bring 20 of them in all at once. But if they're bound within these laws of prosecution, there's nothing they can do.
Well, and that's why I say we have to have the tools. But like you said, we also need to make sure we have the wraparound services for people who are struggling with addiction, who want to get help. And we have to figure out more ways to get people who are struggling with addiction connected to people who can help them get those services. And I don't believe there are enough services available in Vermont these days. My wife and I are actually tomorrow night going to a fundraiser called the Golden Gala
for
Jenna's Promise. And I went there and toured the place. I met several of the young ladies who've been through the program and are now clean, and they're working jobs, they're running the store, they're running the restaurant. And I mean, to see successes like that is just amazing. And so how do we as the state of Vermont do a better job duplicating those things around the state, so we have more support for more people and give them the skills they need? But even more importantly than that, how do we stop young people, or at least slow young people, from getting involved in the first place? And I think not to dump more on our schools, because our teachers are already, social workers and psychiatrists and nurses, and they've got all these services that they're having to take care of because some families aren't.
Right. Do you believe that we did that too, though? I mean, when I was in high school, we had guidance counselors, we had a drug and alcohol counselor, we had DARE program, we had more education about those sorts of things, and all of those things stopped because they were somehow what do you want to call it, they just some people didn't want those sorts of things taught in school. We don't need sex education, drugs, alcohol. When I was in school, we would do rallies in the gym all the time. We would during graduation, they would stick a crashed car on the front lawn of the school that somebody had mangled up and say, this is what's going to happen if you drink and drive. And we don't do any of that anymore. We've gotten away from, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to scare anybody.
Right.
God forbid. I say scare the shit out of them. That's what I say.
Scaring the hell out of them is better than having them die in a car accident because they're drinking or doing drugs,
shooting up drugs
or getting addicted, for sure. So there has to be an education component. But the other thing I think there has to be is an element that keeps kids busy. And one of the things that I'm a proponent of, there are a lot of kids, and I went to school with a ton of them, I was pretty book smart as well as hands-on smart, although I never studied. I just coasted through school because, unlike most kids, I was doing chores on the farm before I went to school, and then doing chores when I got home,
as you got
and doing chores on the weekend, and working all summer. So I had a bit of a different life than a lot of school age kids. And I told the nuns, I went to Catholic school, and I told the nuns that I get what homework done I can during my study halls because I don't have time. Once I get home, I have other things that I have to do, and they never harped on me for it. But we know that some kids aren't academic learners, so figure out what do they want to do. Let's work more on trades. Let's get a hammer in their hand or a wrench in their hand and give them some skills and find something that they love to do, because I think that's the most important thing with our youth. We kept our kids busy in sports, and we were that house where some nights I'd come home, there'd be 12 boys in my house,
Right.
you know, and we fed them all. I mean, it was like running a cafeteria at times, and I'd get home some nights and there wasn't a thing left in my fridge because they all got there before I did. But I loved it. We coached soccer. My wife started a booster club to help buy stuff for the teams. We toted kids around all over. But if you can keep your kids in those team sports or the arts or a band or give them, they have to have something to do, because idle youth will find something to do. And if you're not steering them in the right direction, they're apt to go in the wrong direction. And I think that's something that we really need to focus on, especially the trades, because of the hands-on learning part. And I think when you have young people who don't like book learning and don't do good at it, and then they start thinking they're dumb because they can't do it.
Self-worth and
Yeah,
achievement
exactly.
and-
And they have to have that self-worth, and you have to give them something that makes them feel good that they like to do. And I think we could do a lot better with that.
Agreed.
The Bible does say idle hands are the devil's workshop.
There you go.
So you were talking about defund the police, and one of the things in Barre City is I think Barre City is very pro police. We rely on our officers to provide safety for us, to be there when somebody's breaking into our house. Who do we call? We call the police, and we rely on them. We absolutely do in Barre City, and one of the things that has been happening on a national level and on the state level has been this push to get rid of qualified immunity. And were you in office when they first started talking about that? Okay.
Nope.
I did try to look up to see whether or not Zuckerman was for defund the police. I couldn't find it immediately, but the one thing that I do know that I would love to hear your perspective on is your thoughts on qualified immunity. And for those that don't know, qualified immunity is it doesn't allow people to sue the officer individually for stuff that they do while they're working. That's in the course of their job.
And as long as they're operating within the bounds
Correct.
of their instruction, which is super important. And so that's one of the things that started this whole thing. And I know when the groups were getting together in Burlington, that Zuckerman was definitely part of the defund the police crowd. And I don't know if he's changed his mind now that it went wrong. I have no idea his position at this point. But we have to give our police protection. The other thing we have to do is we have to make sure that if you have a bad officer and they're doing bad things, they need to be held accountable, just like everyone else needs to be held to the letter of the law. They cannot operate outside of the law, just like nobody else can. And I think that is one of the things that really, unfortunately, put all police in a bad light, because there were some really bad police doing bad things. But a police officer who is dedicated to their community is such a huge asset for us, and we need them. They're really a cornerstone of justice in our community. So don't hold them all accountable because a couple of them have done bad things, and don't put them in a position where just in trying to do their job, they feel like they're going to get in trouble. So yeah, I'm totally supportive of our good police, and I'm also totally supportive of if someone is out of line and doing things that they shouldn't do, them being held fully accountable.
Great. So, just driving through Barre, you can tell that Barre's not a very affluent community. One of the biggest problems that Barre struggles with is when the state legislature does something and they don't take into account the effect that it has on people of lower income.
Yeah.
One of those things is the Global Warming Standards Act, I think it was called.
Solutions.
Solutions Act.
Well, it's
thank
not
you.
a solution,
It's not.
then,
No,
so you
it's
should take
not.
the word solution out anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and now what's on the docket is the clean heat standard, which everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
And for a lower income, middle to lower income population, which is Barre City, an increase of, I think the lowest I've heard was 70 cents per gallon on fuel. And that came from the Secretary of Energy's office, I believe. 70 cents on gallon. And when I did the math based on WCAX numbers, it was like $2,500 per household.
Yeah, it's serious money.
It's a huge problem, and I would like to know what your thoughts are on the clean heat standard.
Yeah, I
clean
didn't
heat
support
standard.
either of those bills. Of course, I wasn't in the legislature when the clean heat standard passed. I was an opponent of the global, not a solution bill. It seems silly to give people permission to sue us, which we know is going to cost the state money that could be used for better things. Pretty much every single piece of legislation the legislature has passed in the last 20 years that they pretend is addressing climate change has been regressive. Now, all the way back to Efficiency Vermont. Efficiency Vermont has done some great work. It by far, out of all of the policies they've passed, Efficiency Vermont has done the most. But it's extremely expensive to run. Mm-hmm. It's got a very expensive budget. And if you look at what they're doing these days, it's like they subsidize new furnaces and heat pumps. They're all pushing the heat pumps now. Mm-hmm. We all pay into that, right? Every month on our bill. Poor people, rich people, businesses, and everybody in between pays that. But if you ride around in poor neighborhoods, you don't see heat pumps on the side of poor people's houses, right? You ride around in affluent neighborhoods, they've got solar panels, they've got heat pumps. Well, the reason is because poor people can't afford the matching dollars to put that heat pump in. And they don't have the wherewithal to put the solar panels on, but they're paying for it. Mm-hmm. So poor people are subsidizing affluent people's solar panels and heat pumps. It's totally regressive. And so the theory that the liberals in Montpelier are operating on is that government can invest our money better than we can, but they're taking money from everybody, and only the affluent people, middle class, some working class probably get stuff, but mostly it's middle class and higher, people who could afford to put a heat pump in themselves, that are taking advantage of it. You don't go by a poor person's house and see a Tesla sitting in the yard. Mm-hmm. But poor people are paying the taxes that go to the tax rebates on electric cars. And so from my perspective, every single thing that they have done has been regressive, and that's what's making it harder and harder for working class people and the working poor to survive in Vermont. And that is one of the reasons I got into the race. And that is, you'll see on my signs, it says a voice of the working class, because I grew up working class. I grew up on a dairy farm. We didn't have a lot of money. I went to a 2-year college because that's all I could afford. I started my own business pretty much as soon after I got out of college, and I've been, working 6 or 7 days a week most of my life.
Did you pay all your tuition by yourself?
I did. My parents had no money. I came out with a small debt. And here's the thing. I wanted to go on to university. I just couldn't figure. I went to a 2-year technical college, graduated with an associate's degree. I said, okay, I got a little school debt, which it was ridiculously little. And I said, I need to go to work and pay this off, and then I'll look and see if I can figure out how to go to university. Once you get to working, and it's hard to
Right, you went to the school of hard knocks
exactly.
instead.
So I know what it's like to live that working class life, and it's just too many people in the legislature don't know. David Zuckerman grew up in one of the wealthiest zip codes in America, with a silver spoon, and had every privilege handed to him. How can a person like that know what it's like for a working class family who's busting their butt all week to make enough money to pay the bills that are already stacked up on the table at home? They don't get it. And so they keep adding these costs, saying, oh, it's just another 1,000 here, it's another 1,000 there. That's not that bad. But for some people who are already struggling, it's going to make some people homeless. People aren't going to be able to afford their heat. They added $100 million across the state to electricity bills this year, and the majority of that money is going to wealthy developers, the millionaires that are putting up solar panels, and then the property tax. And then they talk about affordable housing. There is no affordable housing in Vermont.
Right, it doesn't exist.
Because by the time you build a house, pay the utilities, pay the property tax, how can you rent it affordably? You can't. And the average cost to build an apartment these days is between $400,000 and $500,000. So go out and spend the money and tell me what the rent is on that. And that's what I challenge any of the legislators who want affordable housing to go out and invest their own money, buy some old houses, fix them up, rent them affordably. Build some new housing, rent it affordably. Right. Let's see how much money you make.
$700 a month, and we'll see how well you do.
And see how long you stay in business.
And that's a real misconception, I think, of many, is that if you are a landlord, if you are a business owner, that you somehow have gobs and gobs of money, and you don't. I mean, most of those people are just barely making it by.
And you know how they make it?
You do it because you want to, or you love to, or this is what you choose to do as your career. It's not that you're making gobs of money.
No, and they make it because they're putting 60 or 80 or 100 hours in. And that's what I said at one of the rallies we had. A lot of Vermonters have their 40 hours in by Wednesday. And the legislators don't get that. We, us guys in small business, some of us have done okay. Some of them have gotten big and done very well. I never really wanted to get big because I don't like running people. I like to do the work. I like to know how everything is done that has my name on it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist that way. But the only way we make it is working hard. And most people don't have it in them to work that 60, 80, 100 hours a week.
And that's where, and so here's the fine line. We talk about the poor and the poor paying in, and then the middle class and the upper class maybe, taking advantage of some of the incentives that everybody is paying into. But I really think we have a fine line here too, when we have those thinking, how much more are we going to pay to continue all of these services and to pay for the hotels that are open for God knows when, how long, for people that don't necessarily want to work. I mean, it's a fine line when we talk about, and we have a lot of people that don't want to work. And let's face it, if you build it, they will come. And
Yeah.
we've kind of built it. And
Yes.
now we're in a situation where what do we do?
And there is a pretty strong percentage. I think I read it's over 30% of the homeless people here did come from somewhere else. But yes, we have a serious problem with homelessness. And like today, down around Chittenden County, every corner you come to, there's somebody standing there with a cardboard sign, homeless, can you spare some money? And my campaign manager was saying to me today, it's funny, they're standing at the entrance of a mall, and on every door, on every store, it says help wanted. And so if you can stand there the whole day with a sign, maybe you should go and ask somebody for one of those jobs.
Right. And then we have people that will say, you can't get a job without stable housing. And, if you're living in a tent, you can't have a job. And if you don't have a roof over your head, if you don't have a place to shower and eat, and I understand that there is some truth to that, and I certainly have compassion for that. But I also have to say, there were times in my mom's life or other family members that I have in their lives where there was no stability about it. But they did whatever they had to do to fight, to figure it out, to get by. And I just feel like the fine line is there's not a lot of fight anymore for oneself anymore.
Yeah, and somebody else was talking to me, and I haven't looked further into this, but they said if you actually, our unemployment rates are always really low, but if you dig deeper into the numbers and look at the number of Vermonters that are not working, they said it's a scary high number because a lot of them are no longer looking for work, and then you've got all the folks that are homeless, like you said, which is, really a tough pill to swallow when so many people need employees, and every one of those employees would help create tax dollars and make people whole and, just make the money go around the community that much better. It's a little disturbing to hear those kind of things.
What do we do? Do you have any ideas?
Well, so my campaign manager, he said they had a guy that got a job, and then they found out that he was living in his car, and they pay their employees well, and they said, he was like living on site at the business, and they found out, and he said, so we said, well, we want you to keep working here. He was a good worker, and they helped him. They helped him find housing, and he put some money away, and then they helped him get a car. And so, there are some businesses that need help, and if a person shows up and wants to work, there's a lot of employers that will work with them. But yeah, it's a tough issue because, like you said, some of those people don't want to work, and you can't make somebody that doesn't want to work be a good employee.
Right. And if we can't make them want to work, then we have to make them at least want to volunteer or do something.
Well, they should be
to kind
doing
of
something to contribute.
Give back to what they're getting.
Exactly.
And that's not because you want to be cruel to them. It's just that you want to give them what you're saying when you go to high school and you want to see more in the trades. You're just trying to give them self-worth. And self-worth is sometimes worth way more than a roof over your head, believe it or not. I believe it is anyway.
No, it is. It's worth a lot. And, unfortunately, some of them have other underlying issues that haven't been addressed, whether it's mental illness or other health-related issues or substance
addiction,
abuse,
veterans,
and so all of it. And so we have to do a better job with wraparound services. And I know that that's expensive, and somebody's got to pay for it.
But we're paying now.
But we are paying now, and we need to try to help as many people as we can become self-sufficient, productive members of society, because it's not only good for society, it's good for them. Like you said, the whole self-worth thing, I think everybody needs to feel like they're contributing, like they're needed, like they're productive. And I really think that really helps people out.
All right. Well, Raylene, you obviously didn't warn him about the trigger words for me, did you?
What did he didn't say electric vehicle, did he?
No, but he mentioned Tesla. He
Oh.
did mention Tesla.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love this subject, Michael.
I just
Oh,
want to be very
gosh.
clear for folks that
Michael does not.
Michael doesn't have a Tesla?
I do not have a Tesla. I have that beautiful, gorgeous green Jeep that's sitting right out there that people can barely see in the
gas-powered.
window. All gas. I did try to look into getting an EV version of it, but it was like $20,000 more.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but the gas is cheaper.
Yeah.
Currently, until the Clean Heating
Yeah.
Standards Act goes in,
Until they
and then it will
jack
be
the price up
It will be
with
a different
gas. Yeah.
conversation I'll have.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really frustrates me is the desire to push people into EVs, and especially when the technology is not necessarily there yet for us.
Or is it ever
And-
going to be?
Correct, and it may not be. I have hope that it will be eventually, but the fact is that it's not now. And there was legislation that was brought forward to make it so that inspections are not done on EVs for the first 5 years. Just since you triggered me, with
That's
that term,
ridiculous,
I'm gonna
because
ask
if
you
a
what your
ball
thoughts
joint
are.
if a ball joint is bad in the front of an EV, it's just as dangerous as a bad ball joint on a gas job. So that is absolutely absurd. If we're gonna, so there's another
Brakes,
trigger
okay,
for
yeah.
me: inspections, because the legislature several years ago allowed motor vehicle department to change inspections, which is also regressive, and they've gotten so fussy that a lot of places won't inspect older cars, which affects the poor. And so tons of people now run their vehicles with no inspection sticker because they can't afford to get a new car, and they can't get that one inspected. So back to EVs. This is one
I'm okay with you going further down that road. As someone that believes
well, how many
we should
hours
get-
do we have?
as a person that believes we should dump the inspection process altogether, but
Well, I think they should inspect brakes and front end parts.
okay,
That's
I'll,
it.
I'll take it.
Those are your safety things.
Yep.
If a ball joint goes, your front wheel comes off. Dangerous for you, dangerous for other people. If you lose your brakes, same thing. Rust holes, and yeah, it's over the top right now. And again, it's affecting poor people. The people who can afford to trade their car in every 2 years, no problem. But get this, I've even heard from people. One of my friends had a brand new Toyota and went to get it inspected, and it had rust on the brake rotors, and they wouldn't inspect it. And it's like, it's brand new. It's Vermont. It's going to have rust on the rotors. So.
And they
Absolutely.
take pictures now that
And
all
then they
get
take
digitally
pictures that
sent
stay
to
in a
DMV,
record. Oh,
and
yeah.
all of that has to be cleared before you can get
Yep.
a sticker.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy. Back to EVs. So about 10 years ago, MIT did a study that said electric cars will be a blip in history, that hydrogen, cold fusion, and several other fuels that they're working on now will overtake them, because the batteries don't have enough energy density for them to be practical. They're fine if all you do is run from here to Montpelier and back. If you're running around in a little city, then they're probably fine. But out where I live, they're not fine, especially in the winter if you got to turn the heater on. But here's the kicker. And this is part of what drives me crazy about the so-called greenies and this so-called, all this energy transition to save the planet. Over 70% of the cobalt mined in the world comes from the Congo, where they cut down rainforests and use child and slave labor to mine the cobalt. It then gets shipped off to China, where they also underpay their labor and abuse their environment, and it gets built into batteries. And then it either gets put in an EV or shipped over here on a ship that burns crude oil to bring it over here. So you want to tell me that when that Tesla or any other electric car lands here, that it's green, when 70% of the cobalt that's being used to make those batteries is coming from child and slave labor in a place they're destroying the environment and the people of the Congo? I would strongly disagree. That is not green. We cannot do damage on the other side of the planet and turn a blind eye to it. And that is exactly what's happening. Same with the solar panels. A lot of those solar panels are being built in China with coal power in factories that don't pay their help, that don't have PPE, that don't take care of the environment. And then once they get over here, they're green. And I think it's a travesty. And I got interviewed by the Vermont Conservation Voters Board. And can you believe when I mentioned cobalt mining in the Congo that nobody on that board had heard of such a thing? Now, I would say for an environmental advocacy group to not know that, they're either ignorant or they're lying. I mean, really, you're an environmental advocacy group. You should know what's happening around the globe for the sources of the products that are coming here.
Reminds me of the argument of the plastic bags, which I'm not going to ask you. I'm very tempted. I am very tempted, but I'm not going to ask you whether or not you voted for it, because I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be nice. I'm just not going to ask the question. But
you just already told us.
I know.
You just already asked and answered the damn thing anyways.
Have you seen the studies on that where you have to keep your reusable bag for 19 years to make up for the carbon footprint?
But did you vote for the legislation?
I can't remember, to tell you the truth. I may have because of the garbage aspect, but I hated it. But I can't tell you to tell you the truth, I cannot remember how I voted on that. Do you know how I voted?
I don't. I know Paul Poyer voted for it, and I gave him
I truthfully cannot remember on that one, and I remember on most of the important ones. I can't remember if I voted in favor or not.
Yeah,
but it doesn't make it's hilarious. So I went to New Hampshire one day and stopped at Shaw's, bought a few groceries, and they still give you the plastic bags, right? And I loved them. I reused them.
You use them,
same
right?
here.
Yeah,
They're
the
not
little
single
trash
use.
cans.
They call them single use. They're not single use.
No.
And so the next time I go grocery shopping here, I stop in Shaw's up in Newport. And the guy goes, "Do you need a bag?" I pull them out of my pocket and I go, "No, when you go to New Hampshire, they give you these great little reusable bags." And he just laughed.
Yep.
But no, and there again, for the trash aspect, the people throwing them out, that was horrible, right? But we always legislate to the lowest common denominator. So for all of those of us who were responsible and reused them and put them in the trash when we were done with them, they were very handy. And even though they were plastic, they were more environmentally friendly than the reusable bags. Even though I love my reusable bags, they're heavier, they don't rip, they don't break. But if you actually look at the carbon footprint, they're doing more damage than the little lightweight ones.
Well, I'm glad that you agree with that. So you're a farmer, correct? What kind of farming do you do? You do?
Yeah, I don't really do that much farming anymore. We mostly rent our farm out, but we do still grow hemp and cannabis on the farm.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't going to go down that route.
Hey, that's fine.
I promise I wasn't.
Well,
that's
that's
not
what
where
he
I was
wants there. He's
heading.
being
Yeah.
But we
honest.
can go down there. We can definitely go there.
Listen, I'm an open, honest guy, and I invite anybody to ask me any question.
So for the record, for folks that don't know the behind the scenes story, we were talking and I said, I saw a picture of you with something. And he was like, I don't know, what'd you see? And it was the picture of you and next to some hemp or marijuana. I'm not sure which one it was. But I didn't, what I wanted to ask you was not about the hemp or marijuana. In the state of Vermont, and I used to get after Tommy Walls all the time about this. So, I mean, you probably had involvement in this when they were talking about allowing raw milk to be sold, right? So you can do a lot of things in the state of Vermont,
Right.
but you're not allowed to buy raw milk. And I mean, you can if you go to the farm, you look how it's made.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like certain stupid rules that are set up. And what I want to know is, would you support legislation so that I can walk into Cumbies and get some raw milk?
Well, so that's a funny story because one of my friends has been telling the story about me, Ann Donahue, who's the rep over in Northfield, and she remembers it, and I actually had forgotten it until she brought it up. But when we were arguing about whether we should be able to buy raw milk or not in the state of Vermont, I was in the House at that point, and I stood up on the floor and said, "I'm from Vermont. I drink what I want," and I sat back down. That was my whole speech on the thing. I grew up on raw milk, but there are some problems. There can be problems with raw milk, and that's why they started pasteurizing it. It can make people sick. It can kill people. And so if you follow certain guidelines, you can probably make sure it's safe. And that's why they ask people to go to the farm, make sure you like what it looks like. And even then, you couldn't tell if the bacteria that are going to kill you were
Right.
there or not.
Right.
But, I'm a bit of a libertarian there. And, people should be able to drink raw milk if they want raw milk, knowing that there may be a risk. And it's the same with going to a farm to buy some chicken or some beef that's not inspected. I'm totally for people being able to do that because most likely it's way better for you than the stuff that comes out of commercial slaughterhouses.
Yep.
But the buyer beware. The buyer has to know that if it's not inspected, if it's not pasteurized, there could be a problem with it, and it could make them sick. But I'm all for personal liberties.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad to hear that. I'm a big proponent of raw milk. I haven't had it for a while.
Oh, God.
Actually, I gotta talk to your
I know.
your
You
son.
keep saying, I got to talk to.
My brother and
Yeah.
I, when we were teenagers, we probably each drank like a gallon a day. Yeah, my mother always said if I had to buy milk, you guys would have broke the bank.
Yeah. My kids were both the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
I
yeah.
do
It's
like
good
milk.
food, man.
It is.
Raw milk is good food.
It is the cream on the top.
Oh, yeah.
you give it a
We
little
used to
shake.
dip that off. We'd have these gallon jugs with a big top on them, and you'd put it in the fridge and leave it overnight. And the next morning, that's what you had on your cereal. You took the ladle and you scooped the heavy cream out and put it on your cold cereal. That was living. Or on blueberries or raspberries. Oh,
Yep.
man.
Yep.
That's
Those were the
living.
days.
Those
Yeah.
were the
Yeah. They don't do it
days.
anymore. Yeah. You also dared to walk around barefoot and it wasn't a big deal. you
Oh,
know?
I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Kicking cow potties, right?
My feet are still wimpy. I can't do the barefoot thing.
so one thing that is definitely set you apart from from your opponent who either tomorrow when you win or even today as your opponent, you are endorsed by Phil Scott. And I'd like to, because Barre City, we like Phil. We're follow Phil folks.
Most of us.
Most of us,
Yeah.
most of us are pro Phil Scott.
Yeah.
Phil Scott has been very good to Barre City, and to Barre and to Vermont in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we vote as a city. We vote. I think it was like 1,900 to 600 for him. And I would like for you to talk about that because not everybody can walk around and say, I've got the endorsement of Phil Scott, the most popular governor in the United States.
Right.
Right, and that's it. It's like when 80% in the last poll gave him a 80% approval rating. You must be doing something right. And so Phil and I, we have a fairly long history. When I was in the House, he was in the Senate. We were both on the institutions committees, so we did similar work. We met in conference committees, so he's known me since then. And then when I moved to the Senate, he was the lieutenant governor. And then while I was in the Senate, moved up to become governor. So we've got a long history. I mean, we've never been super close, but we've always been friendly. We've worked on a lot of legislation together. And even though I, at that point, was serving as a Democrat and he was a Republican, politically, we've always been very close, just like his good friend, Senator Mazza. You know, Senator Mazza was a Democrat, but he was the old school Vermont Democrat like myself. And I like to tell people my grandfather was a Democrat, but he would not recognize the Democratic Party of today. He would say those people aren't Democrats, which is part of the reason I moved, is because I look at Phil Scott and like Casey Toof, who's my campaign manager, who's the minority assistant leader, and a bunch of the other moderate Republicans around here. And I look at those folks and I say, okay, those are the folks that are still standing up for the working class people. They're the ones that are talking about affordability. I guess it's time for me to leave the party that has forgotten the working class and doesn't care about affordability, because I no longer can associate with them. I don't understand what they're doing. But yeah, so Phil and I have had a great relationship over the years, worked together on a lot of stuff, and I'm just honored that he's endorsed the campaign, and it's really big for us. Today, the governor's office sent out, I think, a little over 14,000 emails asking people, please get out and vote, and when you do, please vote for John for lieutenant governor. So just a huge boost to our campaign to have them on our team or to be on their team. And I want to work with Phil Scott and recruit people around this state who I think would be good legislators.
Yeah.
And I don't care what party they're from. And that, there again, you can't please all of the people all the time. And so there's still a bunch of Republicans are saying, oh, he's a Democrat. I'm not voting for him. He's not a Republican. And I say to those people, there are 90,000 Republicans in the state of Vermont. There are 250,000 Democrats in the state of Vermont. If we don't invite people like myself to join the Republican Party, we will continue to lose statewide elections.
Absolutely.
And I have talked to so many Democrats this year who have said the exact same thing, that I no longer identify with that party. And especially up in Franklin County, even my campaign manager, Casey Toof, for generations, his family has been Democrats. And I've talked with a whole bunch of families up there that have been Democrats for generations, like my family, who say, we do not recognize this party. What are they doing? And more of them are coming over. And that's what we need. We need to rebuild this party from the middle and try to bring some common sense back into the State House. And I want to recruit more people who've run small businesses, because there are too few people in that building that have run small businesses. And I say this a bit tongue in cheek, but I'm also serious about it. I don't think there's enough people in that building that can do math, because the math that I'm seeing does not work out.
I agree.
And for most families looking at it, the math is not working out.
Yeah. No, that's true. And as a former chair of the Barre City Republicans, and I've been a Republican ever since I've been able to vote. Before I was able to vote, I wasn't a Republican, but we won't go down that route. You know, I'm a big proponent of the big tent philosophy on Republican.
Yeah.
And as someone that has been a Republican since I've been able to vote, I have also gotten the same type of crap that you've gotten on that level, where you're not a Republican comments.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll just say, as a Republican, welcome to the party.
Well, thank
It's
you.
all great.
And you know, so I have taken some crap, and of course you're going to, and there's a whole bunch of people that are mad at me because I've said I'm not going to vote for Trump, and I made my decision on Trump long before he ever got into
Can I
politics.
just ask you, your decision to vote for Kamala or Trump, How is that going to impact your ability to do your lieutenant governor position? Can
Yeah.
you just tell
Not
me that?
at all.
Not.
Not
Can you
at
tell
all.
me? Can you-
Right.
And so
It's
I've told,
not.
and for some reason, people are real interested, and they keep asking Phil Scott the same thing. It's like, what does it matter? This is me. You're judging your vote for lieutenant governor on me. You're judging Phil Scott on your vote on him. Why does it matter?
What you can do to help us.
Exactly.
The rest
Not
of
who
it.
you're going to support. And so I have taken some crap on that, and I've told people I'm not voting for Trump, and I'm not voting for Kamala because, in the same reason I didn't vote for Joe Biden, is because they attacked the Second Amendment and they would like to disarm Americans. And I just don't agree with that. Our forefathers put it in the Constitution, and I think it is brilliant that it is the Second Amendment, because the most important thing is free speech. But how do you protect free speech if there is no Second Amendment, if the government becomes oppressive? And that's why our forefathers put it in there. But yeah, to hear some of these, so actually, my opponent in the primary, Greg Thayer, he was on a rant on social media the other day saying that I want to change the party and our party is just fine the way it is, he said. And it's like, okay, you're fine with losing statewide elections every year. Okay, and it's like he didn't want to, and I've heard this from some of the folks on the right, that they don't want to invite people in the middle in, which I think is counterproductive. I think it's silly.
I agree.
I think it's a losing proposition. And that said, I have been so humbled by people that I know that are politically far to the right of me who are supporting me 100%. And that really makes me feel great, because I did wonder that when I switched parties. I did. I knew that I was going to take some fire. But I've had some really great people in party establishment and just random people reaching out that I know are substantially to the right of me, and they've thrown their support wholeheartedly in. And so it's been very nice how warmly I have been accepted into the Republican Party by most people.
I'd much rather have somebody be honest about it and say, this is where I was, this is why I'm not anymore, and throw me a raft instead of helping me keep circle the drain. That's what I mean. Come on.
Well,
At some point we have to wise up and say, it's not even a D or an R anymore. It's just a V. Are you a Vermonter?
Exactly.
Are you here for us, or are you not?
The R stands for real.
Right.
Right? The R stands for real now. And that's what we need to do. We need to be real. I really like that slogan, the whole get real thing. It's like, that's what it's all about. Let's just be real.
great.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we are at 1 hour and 3 minutes.
Look at us go.
We definitely took you past the 1 hour mark, but I want to thank you greatly for coming in. I'd like for you to give your final pitch why folks should vote for you and not the other guy.
Hey, folks, I'm what you see. I'm an open, honest guy. I have worked for years in the legislature in a nonpartisan way, really dedicated to my constituents. And if I can get elected as lieutenant governor, I'll work for my constituents of the entire state. Doesn't matter what party they're part of. I really want to be a voice of working class Vermonters. I want to bring their voice back into the State House because I believe it's been lost. And I really want to be able to bring information back out to the public, because I don't think the media is covering how some of these bills really affect us. And I want to make sure that people have that information. I'm really hoping that we can turn this state around, because I have grandchildren, and I want this to be a place where my grandchildren can afford to live, work, and play. And the way it's going, I don't think they're going to be able to afford to live here.
All right. Well, John, thank you for joining us. Folks, this is Barre Beat with John Rodgers running for lieutenant governor. Thank you for coming up here and traveling the long distance. I know that people that are watching really appreciate it, getting to know who you are. Hopefully, we get to see you again.
Thanks for having me. Happy to make the trip. You just give me a holler.
Yeah.
We definitely will. We definitely will. For those that are voting tomorrow, John Rodgers will be on the Republican ticket. And
As will Michael Booten if you write him in.
Yep, that's true. If you write me in. And of course, then in November, hopefully we'll see Mr. John Rodgers on the lieutenant governor ticket as well. And you can vote for him then as well. And maybe in January, we'll be serving together in the same building.
That'd be great.
So, but yes, thank you for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for watching the Barre Beat podcast live from Main Street, Barre, Vermont, Fly in the Wall Production Studios. Guys, have a great evening, and we'll see you maybe next week.